All right, welcome everybody to the second of our weekly episodes recapping Andor season two. And I'm calling this chapter two, and we're going to be focusing on episodes 4 through 6. And I am here with, like before, my good friend Joseph Tabinkin, longtime art discussion partner. And I've got a special guest today, Lanka Lagvilova from Tbilisi, Georgia. And I've known Lanka just very recently. I met her in Budapest and we've bonded over art. And she recently reached out to me and said how much she loved Andor. And I wanted to have her join us because today I want to start off by talking a little bit about personal and historical connections to Andor. We will get into our discussion of Andor episodes 4 through 6 of season two in a moment. But first, I want to talk a little bit about, both with Joseph and with Lanka, about how we personally connect to this really epic story that takes us in situations that I have luckily not encountered in my life. And I'll start off by saying a little bit about Tony Gilroy, the creator's connections and intentions here. Um, I've heard a couple of interviews, most recently on my favorite television show podcast called The Watch on the Ringer Podcast Network, where Tony Gilroy gave an interview. And there he cited a little bit of his process in thinking about Andor. And he was really stressing, I am not trying to make it about current events. He described how years ago he did a lot of study, a lot of reading on historical figures of different insurgencies, rebellions, revolts, from a young Joseph Stalin to Toussaint Louverture to Mao Zedong to Oliver Cromwell, all different periods, all different kinds of revolutions and revolts and insurgencies. And he described how he processed all this. And Andor is this kind of distillation or summation of what he's learned and what he takes as important in the development or evolution of an insurgency that becomes a rebellion, that becomes a revolution, both socially and also within an individual's soul. As I've been trying to understand how to personally connect, I've been realizing that that's been a little bit challenging for me. And in fact, just yesterday, talking to a friend, I was realizing the character that I think I might connect to the best or feel most related to is actually Cyril Karn, the villain, this young man who is ambitious, who tries his best at work, and his colleagues are don't try at all. They're lazy, they're bureaucratic, and then he's got issues with his mother, and then he wants to introduce his girlfriend to his mom, and it just so happened that like a couple of weeks ago I introduced my girlfriend to my mom for the first time, and so I feel like a lot of times, like, if his life is one that I can put myself in the most. And I remember Joseph last time, I immediately came in saying, wow, I haven't laughed so much as that scene with Dedra and Edie and with Cyril. And I realize now why, because it was so familiar to me and it was a little bit of a catharsis, a laughing catharsis to experience that. Now, when I've been thinking about, okay, that's the villain, and that's a small part of the story, and this is a story about a rebellion and Cassian Andor's rebellion, and I've been trying to think about how I would get into that, and that's been a little bit more difficult. But the question I've had for myself is I have not spent much time being politically active. I have my passion, teaching art, researching literature, all these things. And sometimes I it touches upon political things, but I have never really become very politically active. And I thought to myself, when should I? Was it during COVID and when there were lockdowns? Is it now with things going on in the US now? When would I? And so that was the kind of question that kind of got me into Cassian Andor's position in season one. At what point do you start to place political activism in a more as a more important value than other things that you would normally give your time to, like writing books or going to art museums or making love, those things. So I started thinking about the people that I know in my life that might be able to relate to more. So during COVID, I still did my work, but I had friends whose businesses would be shut down and that who by necessity would need to become politically active for their livelihood. And I think for me, I don't know why I didn't think about this years ago when with Andor season one, but I thought about my dad recently. My dad, who grew up in Algeria during the Algerian Civil War. He is French. His parents are French, but he was born and raised in Algeria with Algerians as his friends. And so he was put in the middle of a position where friends around him are on different sides. Is he going to join with his Algerian friends? Is he going to join with his French friends? And so he was caught up in the moral complexity of being in the middle of a rebellion. And so I could sympathize with my dad, or I could see my dad in Cassian's position, whether or not he should do something about this, or he should, or what side he should take, whatever it is that you need to decide as an individual within this complex, fiery political situation. So Joseph, I'd like to start with you and ask you a little bit about how you've maybe approached trying to personally connect. And then, Lanka, I especially want to talk to you about it, especially living in Georgia, the former Soviet Republic, or Soviet, not Republic, Soviet satellite country or part of the Soviet Union, and to understand more what's going on in your country and maybe how political issues are playing out there that you might see mirrored in Andor. So, Joseph, let me start with you.
Well, I don't think I have any personal connection in particular because what's happening is in Andor is so far removed from what I have to deal with in life, which is a good thing. Uh, so from that perspective, any personal connection I think I would try and make would be inadequate to the magnitude of what is happening in Andor. Um, I think one of the reasons I like it so much is I do love learning about history, in particular to try and understand essentials about what has worked and what hasn't worked in human interactions. How do we avoid some of the mistakes of the past? And so what Andor does is what I've been so fascinated by is it's distilling the essentials of tyranny and rebellion. And it sounds like Tony Gilroy did that intentionally by studying um, a lot of rebellions and tyrannical governments. And so from that perspective, it's arming me, I guess, for maybe a future rebellion I might need to join, but hopefully not. So I'm much more interested to hear Lanka's experience with it.
All right. Thank you, Joseph. So, Lanka, uh, would you tell us a little bit about your country, where you live, and maybe what's going on right now? And then afterwards, how does that connect to Andor for you?
Hello, everyone, and hello to your followers. They have made really right choice that they are following you because you have all the time really brilliant topics. As for me, let me share just one sentence which describes my situation and situation in my country. We are literally living in Andor right now. This country called Georgia, but we are living in Andor. So when Andor was released, it resonated to our life and daily life in Georgia. That's why I paid a lot of attention, despite the fact that we already knew Andor's character from Rogue One, and we know his final episodes of life. But rising once more again, his character, and in dynamic in that way, he was developed, his character, as in Cassian Andor. It was really brilliant. In case of Rogue One and in Star Wars, we have special fighters and special guards against the state. They are Jedis, for example, and they are people from high rank. But in case of Andor, Andor is just a regular guy. I mean, this new Andor.
Mhm.
So that's why it was very important for me, and it was like a signal for me, okay, here will be shown very regular and very usual daily life of a person who is just starting his life doing something wrong things and living illegally. And from one point of view, he is not connected in and doesn't have any touch in politics. But one day he realizes that his life is completely conquered by politics and by politicians. This is what in our country was developed in that period when Andor was released. And I also had a really great interview, one of Star Wars fan also. And nowadays, when I repeated this interview, all his prejudices became reality. We recorded it, I think, 2 years or 2+ half years ago. So Andor completely resonated that period of Georgian life. And I think that in connection of this topic, that Andor was just regular guy. Tommy Mr. Gilroy wanted to show us that how politics influence not only the Jedis and high-rank people, but regular people, because not each people are a representative of high rank, but most of people are just regular citizens. So how the life of citizens is going in this situation happening in Andor. And I think that in connection of this topic, maybe just accident, but also the actor Diego Luna, he represents just a regular guy. For example, we have Jedis, and they have very massive body, and they are all of them mostly are very good looking, and at the one glance you can identify them. Okay, they are Jedis, they have power, and they can be guards, and they can be rebels against state. But in Cassian's case, his appearance, his body, his face, he's very smart, and he is somehow very handsome also, but he doesn't have any characteristics, massive body and so on. He represents by his body also as a regular person. So I think that it is a very eye-catching moment when everyone can identify himself on a body level, that this guy is representing something not unique, but something very regular, which resonates to our life. That's why I was also interested, and I had double attention when Andor was released. And also the steps, how he became fighter against politicians and fire. These steps we experienced in Georgia from my childhood. All Georgians, we have experienced these step-by-step conditions and situations, how and when we became self-defenders, and how to survive in this situation what called not tyranny, but so far not tyranny, but on the first stage, not democratic country. So this development of characters, development of each serials, and new characters like Marva, Cassian's mother, her speech after her death, and her motivational speech how to fight against state and against tyranny. It was really something we needed to motivate ourselves also to be engaged, to fight, to survive. And also from the other side, representatives of state, official persons, their appearance, their manner of speaking, and their houses, even buildings, everything is it's not something which is just fictional. Countries like Georgia, we are experiencing everything. That faces, which are poker faces, when you are talking and you are sharing your experiences and you want to fight to survive, and you want to do something to be to feel good, and their poker faces, and they do not want to support you, and etc. We have different government officials here who have exactly the same faces. And this is why Andor was very, very interesting for me. Even we have another character which is very interesting also for me, Mon Mothma. Also, she's a really brilliant actor also. And as a character, she just painted, sculptured, we can say, sculptured the character who is from one hand supporter of rebellion, and from the other hand she's trying to remain her position and to say no or yes and make decisions she doesn't want, but she has to. So we also have here such persons, and they want to do something and they sacrifice themselves to make a situation better. And I have also heard about Gilroy's interview where he mentioned that he has learned and examined all dictators, including Stalin. And Stalin was from Georgia, from our country. Yes, it's a big shame for us, for me, and like me, for many Georgians, but unfortunately, mainly most people are proud because he's Georgian and he's well known and world known. Yes. It looks like that he examined everything correctly, because each detail, me as a representative of country, we are still experiencing all these bad things to our life. Yes, he has painted everything perfectly. It's not good to say, it's very hard for me, but yes, that's it. And this was main motivation why I started interesting in Andor.
So,
Is there
Lanka,
a
go ahead, Joseph. Yeah.
specific example you can think of? Well, one of the things I love about Andor is how it shows you the way tyranny can creep into everyday life. Little things, just like in the first season, the presence of the Empire um, on their streets. Are there examples of life in Georgia that you can think of, just like an everyday, right? The big moments are like Tiananmen Square, right, where you have these tanks in the streets, but oppression is probably ever present daily. And I'm curious if you can think of an example of real life on Andor, where you see oppression.
Yes, for example, a few people were arrested just because they said Happy Easter to policemen. And yes, they said that it's insult. You do not have right to say Happy Easter, and they were imprisoned a few days, 2 weeks about. Yes, and we also have cases when people were just gathering. We had here protests. All the day we have protests about more than 150 days already. And during these protests, people, of course, are gathering and they are sharing their opinion. And regular people who don't know each other, and etc. And policemen started arresting people who are just standing and discussing topics such we are now discussing Andor, and people who are discussing what should be done and how they want to live, what kind of state they want, and some policemen recorded it. Or covered undercover policemen recorded, and they are jailed about more than 6 years. Yes, maybe it sounds for you, Joseph, especially little bit crazy, but yes. Yes, this is our reality. And we have also in these days, by the way, a few days ago, people were interviewed in the police office just because of Facebook statuses. Yeah.
That's all very frightening, and you're making me think a lot of what goes on in Ferrex when when the stormtroopers, when the ISB comes in and they start to control things and to require permits and to arrest people. And it's really interesting to hear you talk about Cassian being like an everyman, that it's not the great heroes, but somebody that an average person can identify with. And that's what drew you to Andor. And I'm curious because I looked up the viewership ratings for Andor season 2, and they are not very good. And Andor is not a very popular TV show here in the United States. So I'm wondering, Lanka, do your friends also watch Andor? Do you get the sense that a lot of people draw inspiration from Andor or from stories like Andor?
Yes, in Georgia, yes.
So a lot of people watch Andor in Georgia.
Yes,
That's
yes.
that's really interesting because it's very vital for them. Um, you also mentioned the character of Marva, and the character of Marva struck me because in that speech that you reference, where she says, "I've been sleeping. I've been sleeping." They've been slowly getting more powerful. And now at this moment, she is saying, no, we need to waken up and we need to fight. And it sounds like that is a speech that feels like somebody who is in in a country that is has an oppressive regime might really hold on to, because you have these little things that happen, like people saying Happy Easter, and it's taken as an insult to the cops, and they're taken, but that's not me, that's somebody else, and I'll just keep going with my life. So I'm curious, is one thought that you have, and maybe you have, maybe this is already the case, or do you think about at what point do I need to do I need to wake up and do more than I'm doing? That I need to, or can I do more? Is Marva wants to fight. If she could fight, she would fight. And she inspires this rebellion. And so when when you are watching this, are you not just like watching and being inspired, but are you actually thinking about at what point would it become something more than just protests? Do you think a little bit about that?
Yes, sure. It's not only for inspiration. Inspiration is something you don't think, and one day something flames in yourself. But in this specific case, like Marwa's speeches, it's just, what kind of feeling that you are thinking you should do something, and someone, even this is a fictional character, she's also saying that you have very limited time and do not make any mistake. Time flies and you should act right here and right now. It's just a guidebook, instead of just showing and to have motivation or inspiration. It sounds a little bit naive. It's not inspiration. It's just someone, we knew better life from books, from thoughts, from philosophers. And nowadays we are thinking of better life from movies also, which influences our life. So in Marva's case, the same situation we have. It's not for motivation, it's like a guidebook. In some cases, we are reading books about politics, about economic issues, about best life, and etc., etc. One of them is her topic also, what to do, and that we don't have too much time. Time is very restricted and limited for us. Yes, yeah, it sounds just to awake once more again yourself.
So not just inspiration, but a guidebook, practical advice on how to think about your relationship to the political situation that is going on. Joseph, it's interesting. You started off, Joseph, and I started off the conversation by saying I almost connect with Cyril Karn more, like the challenges of working and the challenges of like a relationship with family and so forth. And Joseph, you brought in the idea that, um, okay, maybe one day, but no, it's not something that you feel like you could personally connect to right now. And then with Lanka, we're hearing it's not just something you're personally connecting to, it's something that you are seeing, that you are living in Andor. Um, Joseph, if there's anything else you want to share or any other thoughts you have with what Lanka's saying, and then I'll have Lanka close with any final thoughts that she has on this topic.
Yeah, just I'm grateful to have Lanka here because it's seemed so far to be consistent. Andor, I mean, has been consistent with what I've learned about tyranny and history. Um, and that he's done a magnificent job of essentializing, uh, the different characters and different aspects of tyranny. I read Gulag Archipelago last year, and just one example from that, you see this
Wait,
mach
real quick, can you tell us what is Gulag Archipelago?
Oh, it's about the gulags in Russia and during Soviet Russia and just the nature of them. It goes all the way from how they arrested people to how you move through this machine of a system. But one of the things that you see reflected in Andor a little bit is this idea of quotas of prisoners, right? So, in Soviet Russia, they needed more slave labor, and so they just increased the quotas of people. So, okay, now saying Happy Easter is a crime. Um, and that's a way of filling quotas. And in Andor, you see uh, part of that's a react in season one, part of it's a reaction to the uh heist that they do, but also they clearly need workers for building the Death Star. And so you get a glimpse into the detail. And it just reminded me a lot of
Mm-hmm.
of Gulag Archipelago. But so it's um I don't know what the right word is, validating
Mm-hmm.
affirming to hear from Lanka that yes, this is not just a romanticized, disconnected piece of art that maybe is misrepresenting the nature of tyranny, but is is indicative of what actually happens.
Yeah, yeah, I like that, Joseph. And Lanka, I want to ask one more question about the political situation. You brought up Mon Mothma and her on the one hand being part of the political arena, maybe working with the opposition, working with the tyrants, but also having rebellious feelings. And then in the episodes that we saw, episodes 4 through 6, we also see that political conflict play out on the planet of Gorman, where there's the official and the senator from Gorman who doesn't want to make trouble, who tells Mon Mothma, "No, I can't vote against the Emperor. I don't want to make trouble. We've got to stay calm." And then we have the politician Rylands, who is the leader of the Gorman Front, who has meetings about okay, how oppressive thing the empire is being. And so we see two approaches, two political approaches to a tyrant. And Lanka, I'm imagining that maybe that is a big debate in Georgia among politicians. How much should you try to be friendly with the pro-Russian politicians or with Russia that is really trying to press its influence? And how much should you try to really oppose it? And I'm curious if you have thoughts or maybe how Andor and how Mon Mothma or the resistance on Gorman, how that captures, how that is a guidebook in a way or a reflection of what is going on in Georgia.
Well, as you mentioned, Russia and Russia's influence on Georgia. I have realized, and in Georgia, we often say that former Soviet countries, we have former Soviet countries who developed after collapsing of Soviet Union. But in end, they reduced on a minimum level influence of Russia. But in Georgia's case, unfortunately, maybe because we are very close by territory also, Georgia is a border of Russia and Russia is in border of Georgia. Maybe this is the main factor. I don't know exactly, but influence of Russia is still continuing till today. That's why all the time political parties and politicians who have really great values, they are always suffering and they do not have much power to be more influential than influence of Russia. So in Georgia nowadays, we don't have even one political party who is valuable and who can fight against the situation we have, like in Andor, as I mentioned. Because here is not any chance. Georgia is a small country where, for example, blackmailing works out really very much. What I mean, for example, someone has really good ideas and he or she wants to be a leader or to develop some his political views momentarily, I mean literally momentarily, they are how to say or imprisoned or just to saying bad things about them, or we have interviews about their friends and family and how bad family they have and how they are just doing bad things in the previous life, and everything bad is connected to this person. So it means that as a leader, they are destroyed. And this happens in each situation. That's why, unfortunately, we don't have leaders who are just taking lead and people will follow. So as I described, the reason is very, very simple. Georgia is a small country, and each attempt of each person to be leader, they are momentarily just destroyed.
So
And
they,
destroyed, sorry, but I will just finish
yeah.
it. Their lives are destroyed. also. Not only their political career, but their lives in most cases. And you said Soviet in the beginning of this conversation and interview. You mentioned Soviet republics, and you said that it was not republic, but was republic, Soviet republic, and most ironically, what was? For example, Georgia is a part of Soviet Union, was independent republic of Soviet Union. Yes. It's very ironic. I think that Joseph is completely in a shock right now.
The irony.
I wouldn't say shock. I mean, I can't remember who pointed this out to me, but every dictatorship seems to try and use the words of free systems in there. So it's the People's Republic of China. I think I can't remember what Korea calls it. I think a lot of them have the word republic in them to emulate some of the essentials of the American system without having to adopt the essentials.
Yes, and in Georgia we have like a joke. For example, we had a Rome Empire and China Empire and etc. Different empires, but we only use former Soviet Empire and the former Soviet Union. In Georgia, we have this sentence, completely former Soviet Empire, and we do not call Rome Empire and etc. I think that because we want to be, they are really former. No one has a slight fear that they will come back. But in case of Soviet Union, we want to remind each day and in each conversation to ourselves that it's former. It's something that ended. And we are joking like in Georgia that we are reminding it each day to ourselves. That's why we are using former Soviet Empire.
Yeah. Oh,
Yeah.
so you're describing the politicians, and then here I'm going to use this to transition into a discussion of episodes 4 through 6, and maybe our favorite parts or highlights from those episodes. But the way you're describing Lanka, the way that politicians who might want to oppose what's the Russian influence, the former Soviet Russian influence, but it's coming back, or it's really pushing, are destroyed. Their past, their secrets, dirt is found on them, and then their life is basically destroyed so that it prevents them. And that feels like it might be anticipating something that will be coming, maybe for Mon Mothma. Her life hasn't yet been destroyed. She's kind of been the author of destruction, but she's done a good job of making sure there is no dirt. She covered up the $400,000 deficit, and there are spies looking for things on her. So I'm wondering if at some point there is going to be some, maybe in the next episodes after, and maybe next week, the Empire, the Emperor, or Krennic is going to come after her to try to destroy her. So far, they don't think of her as too much of a threat, but maybe if they did, they would do more. Okay, so Lanka, first of all, thank you so much, and I'll echo what Joseph said. It feels validating in a way to hear your experiences, and now maybe you're going to hear more experiences or be able to share more from episodes 4 through 6. And I want to ask each of you, and maybe Lanka, if you want to go first, or Joseph, whoever, any particular scenes, any particular moments that when you watched it, you laughed or you cried or you felt the flame of inspiration, anything from those 4 episodes that rose up to something. Yes, oh, that made me feel. You've got something, Lanka?
Oh, yes. And I think, and I'm looking forward Cyril's transformation. I think that he will start thinking and he will be one who will start fighting for his own life, and who will start with Andor maybe, or with Mon Mothma or someone else. His transformation, I'm looking forward because I think that I have seen some signs.
So what is it that you saw in Cyril? What specific moments did you feel like, ah, there I can see the potential for transformation? What moments from the story do you remember?
Yes, thank you. And I will share it. And by the way, there is a big influence of you and your lecture and with your interview we had to discover very human moments. And I looked with your eyes to this moment when I saw these scenes. My mind just provoked something that it was connected to your lecture in Budapest and also our interview. For example, when Cyril introduced to Dedra and her mother-in-law, so his mother, and he was a little bit nervous. And his face was changing, and his attitude and his mood was swinging when his mother was not all the time very sweet and honey to his girlfriend. So it was something that caught my eyes, and I thought that, okay, this guy has feelings, and this guy maybe will be one of the future fighter. I saw him in a very human moments. Does it make
Mm.
sense what I'm describing? Maybe I need more clarification, but
So long.
I started, sorry, and I will just finish it. After your approach, how to touch and how to look the art, I discovered this approach in movies also, and this is what I saw in Cyril's face and in his eyes. That's it.
Yeah, looking carefully at the characters, there's a lot of body language in Andor. And I want so what you're describing is Cyril and with his mom and his girlfriend there, and you can see the emotions on his face, and it that makes him human. And I think that kind of connects back to what I was saying that I felt him be relatable. And I've one of my favorite moments from the recent show. I really liked all the Cyril scenes, but the moment that made me feel like he's relatable, he's a little bit naive, is after he comes back from Gorman and he's been really successful because he dares and he does a good job. And he comes back and he's in the interview with Partagaz and Dedra and Partagaz, who we have seen him be ruthless to experienced ISB agents. And he praises Cyril and he takes advice from Cyril. He tells Cyril, "What do you need?" And Cyril tells him, "Well, I need for you to keep the shipments going regularly. I need updates on what's going on. I need police presence, all this stuff." And Partagaz says, "You've got it." And after that moment, Cyril he like breathes in, and Partagaz leaves, and then he's there with Dedra, and then he says the lines, "If I were to say right now this is the greatest day of my life, would it spoil everything?" And he's just so exuberant with joy at having something that he's achieved, that he's worked hard at. He had this huge setback by being fired, but now the head of the company essentially is telling him great job, and now he's achieving the kind of success that he wants. And his girlfriend is like, "I'm glad to see you happy," and not brooding like a spider. So I asked for from listeners for thoughts or questions, and listener Andy Dallas was very curious about how the characters of Cyril and Dedra are going to evolve over time. And I'm going to be very curious about Cyril as well. What will he learn from Dedra when, well, how will he react? I'll put it this way. How will he react if he finally learns what he is actually doing on Gorman? That it's not just a plan to uh, attract outside agitators to get the real bad guys, but that actually the overall plan is to eliminate the Gormans. How will he feel about that? Partagaz was very clear not to let, very clear to Dedra, not to let Cyril know what the real overall plan is. Do not tell them. And Dedra says, I keep reminding myself that every day. So I'll be very curious. And I think that will be the moment, Lanka, if and when he learns what he is participating in doing, that he's participating in the destruction of this planet and these people. How will he react to that? And I think that will tell us a lot. So, Joseph, how about you? Highlight from episodes 4 through 6?
On the serial front, I've been noticing this growing confidence from, especially from season one. And I think to your point, like a little bit more joy coming in. Like in season one, he was an idealist that was, you know, there wasn't a lot of joy in it though. It was like this determination. Um, but in season two, in episode one, you kind of start to see a little bit more confidence in how he's talking to, he's giving the tour and he's saying, you might think this is mundane, but I was where you were. And our first interaction with him in episode four is him talking to his mom, and just the change in tone I noticed
Uh,
was really interesting.
yeah, he does
Um,
seem more confident, more in control.
and just more
Yeah,
dismissive of her, like
that's
less
true.
brooding. He's got a mission now. I think he's
Yeah,
like a dog with a bone. Like he needs purpose, and when he's
yeah.
given something, he will drive, and that's when he's happy. So I think that's why he starts to feel that joy when he's recognized for it. I'm curious to see what happens. I'm skeptical that he will turn into a rebel.
Mhm,
Um, I'm skeptical he will feel any sense of remorse if at the situation, Gorman. But the one wild card for me is if he is sacrificed as part of that, what will happen? How will that affect him? I don't know.
mhm,
Um, you know, yeah, so that'll be interesting to see, right? If he's on the planet as they start the drilling or
mhm.
whatever, how will that affect it? I think the most, so there were kind of thought-provoking scenes we'll talk about, but the most like powerful scene to me by far was oh man, not Cinta speech. What was the
Vel,
other one?
Vel.
Val speech about Cinta.
Yeah.
That was just a gut punch and so powerful. Um, the line in particular when I rewatched it was she was everything you daydreamed about. Right? Like,
Yeah, yeah. And that, speaking of Cyril, Cyril's a kind of daydreamer too. He has action figures in his room, and he wants to be the law and order policeman. And this young pup who wants to carry a gun around with him. Okay, Joseph. So why did that line hit you?
yeah, just because it captures the pitfalls of idealism, right? Or the dangers of idealism, maybe is what I would say. Um, and you're seeing this a lot right now, right? On college campuses around the world in relation to the Israel-Hamas war, as an example. They're idealistic, right? But idealism can kind of blind you into a romanticism about something that you don't really understand, that you don't fully appreciate. And it's hard until you go through it to really know. Like and it's one challenge I face is living in a very comfortable place without the threat of a tyrannical power. How to keep myself grounded into the reality of situations and that are happening so that I don't let my idealism go into something go astray. And so in this you see it like in this case he is his ideals are at least in a positive direction, right? He is fighting I'm talking about the Parisian character. This was
Yeah.
Gorman is Paris, which maybe we'll talk about, but um uh this Gorman who ultimately kills Cinta, like it's not like he's an idealist like Cyril who is fighting for the Empire. Um, but he's an idealist who is caught up in the romanticism of what a rebellion looks like, who hasn't fully lived it yet. And what I found really interesting about the speech, and maybe this is something I can personally connect to, actually, um, because I have had an experience in business of romanticizing business
Mm.
and then making really foolish mistakes. And I was very fortunate to have a mentor who understood that was part of the process. And I feel like Val gets that there. She doesn't shoot him. She doesn't
Yeah.
tell him stop. She says, you're going to live your life, the rest of your life, making up for this.
Yeah.
Um, and that was essentially the advice I got in my many business failings is like the understanding that it has to start with idealism, romanticizing. You have to then like scrape your knees a little bit. And that's just part of the process. So a good mentor and a good leader will make you feel it. You have to hurt as a result, but make you feel it so that you don't want to experience that pain again, so that you want to grow. So I thought that was particularly powerful.
I love that personal connection that you're making to the having romantic ideas in a business sense and messing up, and then having a mentor who tells you spend your life making up for that. Wear this like skin. I love that line. You're going to wear this like skin. And it makes me think of at that moment, Vel, I think she's now the strongest, one of the strongest characters. Then that was one of the surprising things for me is that she was the stronger of the two between she and Cinta. That Vel, who we saw kind of breaking down last time when she sees like Cinta, who doesn't talk to her for a long time, she gets a glimpse of her and she's just breaking down because she can't have her beloved with her, and her beloved is choosing not to be with her. But she's the one who's saying, she was a warrior, she was a miracle, and now you have got to be. So I wish I'd remember this. I think his name might be Dylan. I don't remember. But I'm wondering if in the next batch of episodes, we're going to see him again
Hmm.
and that he is going to be a dedicated revolutionary because I think he's like the next step up from the silly, stupid
Right.
Maya Pei brigade on the planet that were basically kids with guns. He's a next step up from that, but he's still
Hmm.
not a soldier. He doesn't take orders. He's kind of a dreamer, a daydreamer. But now, maybe in the next batch, we're going to see. Maybe we'll see him again. Maybe we'll see what the soldier looks like. I'll give one highlight for me. This is the first time in these batch of episodes that I am really, really loving the character of Cassian, that I am rooting for him. There was one glimpse of that in the very first scene of this of season two when he speaks to Naya, the Imperial tech who was sabotaging, helping him sabotage the TIE fighter, and he is very compassionate with her and tells her why is it worth doing for this moment, the moment when you have joined the circle, when you have come back to yourself, and now this moment of bonding that we have. And we see two things, two moments of this passionate lover of people that Cassian is. One is the goodbye dance that he has with Bix, that kind of personal hand dance where they caress the outlines of the hands with each other and it seems personal. It seems like a dance, and it's very different from the dances that we had at the Chandelian wedding, all very formal. This is a personal, but this is the first time I see, oh wow, he loves Bix. There is love there between them. And the second moment was the moment when he arrives at his hotel on Gorman and he's talking
Mm,
to the bellhop. And the bellhop is reluctant to share how his father died in the massacre, saving him, the massacre that had happened right in the square in the plaza below. Uh, but Cassian is able to induce him to tell him that story. And as the door hop leaves, and this is the moment that gets me, he says, "Hey," and the bellhop turns around, and Cassian says something like, "Good to know you." And just those words, like it feels so much. It feels like I understand you, and I'm glad to have made your acquaintance as somebody that is part of the same path, as a potential person to join the circle. And I care about the suffering that you had and the feelings that you had, that this, when your dad saved you when you were 12, that's still you stayed here in this town. Your wife wanted to leave, but you stayed here, and that's you. And I'm bonding with you over that. And thank you for telling me that. And it's good to meet you. And Cassian seems to be somebody who wants to get to know the people that that are being oppressed, that that have the story. And he's not just dismissing them or treating them as soldiers or as cannon fodder, but these are human beings that he's connecting to, Naya and this bellhop. So I think those two scenes also set up a bigger conflict, the bigger conflict between he and Luthen. But
hmm
those were two moments that I really, really made me like him. I want to be a part of his rebellion, the rebellion of love and the rebellion of compassion. Um, so I'd love to hear if Lanka or Joseph, you have another favorite moment. I'd love to hear that if you'd like to share.
Well, I
Um,
mean, just from a entertainment perspective, I thought the scene when they were doing the heist, if you want to call it, and it kept cutting back and forth to Clea trying to unscrew the thing. And just the brilliance of the tension, the physical tension that she's building, trying to unscrew this thing. And every time you think it must come loose, it cuts back to a tense moment in the like it was just amazing. Like I just thought it was brilliantly shot and like I couldn't breathe for 5 minutes as I was watching this thing. Like I was holding my breath. Just thought it was incredible.
yeah, and it's making me think, Joseph. Clea might be the character who has it the most together. She might be the real hero of the rebellion. She's the one that keeps Luthen straight. And Lanka, I want to ask you this question. Do you have a favorite character? And you've mentioned a lot of the characters, Marva and Mon Mothma, and how Cassian is an everyday man. But do you have a personal favorite character?
Well, first of all, it was really pleasure to listen both you from your personal perspective. And I just told myself during your speech that I should definitely rewatch all these scenes once more again, because it was very, very impressive from both of you. As for me, Luthen is my favorite character because in his soul and in his mind is reserved and preserved previous era and current era. And mostly, I would like to describe one moment when he's in his shop, and it was in season one, and he's just going around in his shop and looking to the different items there is presented, and among them are Jedi sword and some requisites and other stuff, which reminds us Star Wars fans, Star Wars and other series also. And from the director's perspective, he's looking to these items very carefully, very passionate. Like it seems like someone beloved is standing instead of item or sword or other requisite there. And I think that this is very, very impressive moment, that this is not just an item, just an antique item for him. It's his life, part of his life and part of his soul. That's why I think that number one favorite character is Luthen, and number two is Mon Mothma, of course, because she is a woman and she's mother also, and she has to somehow sacrifice her daughter, maybe because of this arranged marriage and etc. Um, so she's very interesting for me also, as a woman and as a politician, as a person who knows what is better and best life, what she will do, and what kind of thoughts she's suffering. So this is very, very interesting character for me.
Uh, but it's fun to hear you describe both of those characters, and I want to follow up with Luthen, and maybe Joseph. There might be some things you have to say about Luthen, but the way you describe Luthen as being both in the present, but also from the past, and it's dawning on me more and more why he is an antique dealer. I remember Mon Mothma says about him, just in the party, she says something when they're being brought over to the display of artwork. She says, "Well, lucky for me, I've got my historian with me." So he's not just an antique dealer. He's a historian, and all these artifacts are artifacts of wars and rebellions, and we're seeing kind of discussions like that when Mon Mothma talks to Krennic about these artifacts that bring up these battles that were from the past, battles between rebels versus regimes, and Luthen might be is familiar with that. He's familiar with all that. He knows that he's got the big picture perspective that he is. So he's in a sense brings all that knowledge and knows what it takes in order. He's like Tony Gilroy, who's studied all these rebellions in history and knows what they look like and what is a successful one. So he's bringing all that weight to bear on the demands that he's making of his character, of his colleagues, and of his friends, or I don't know if he really has friends, but of the people that are working for him. Joseph, if you want to follow up on Luthen, or if you've got another highlight.
Yeah, maybe a connection from Luthen in particular to the interactions Luthen has with Andor, because it's been
Yeah.
something I've really been thinking a lot about, and a few things are starting to connect for me that have implications on real world conflicts I've been thinking about, um, and have been trying to understand. And the main tension you see with Luthen in season one makes it very clear he's drawn a line in his mind. And I like the way Lanka put it, like his old self versus the new self he has to be. And he even says in one of his interactions with Andor in
Ah,
this episode, we're not the same people we were.
yeah.
Um, and he understands that. And Bix has a line too where she says, if I'm going to give everything, then we're going to win. Like she's not under illusions that she's suffering and having a hard time getting through things. And Andor wants to protect her, and she kind of says, "Hey, if I'm going to go through all of this and give up everything, then it better be for something, um, which is victory."
Yeah.
And in the scenes between Andor um, and Luthen, And we talked last time about, is Andor's journey in season 2 going to be removing the attachments? And I thought that was front and center of this. Is Andor still has attachments? Like a lot of episodes 4 and 5 where his attachments to Bix being present, um, his attachment to the people, as you described, like the individuals, and not wanting to risk too much.
He
Whereas
doesn't want
Luth,
Gorman to blow up. He doesn't want it to burn bright
no, and
because
Luthen's
he's not,
very,
he sees them, they're not soldiers. They're not ready for this. They will be crushed. He
yeah,
doesn't want them to be crushed.
and Luthen's not, naive about that. He says, well, if they do get crushed, it'll burn brightly.
That
Um,
he, in fact, that might be the best outcome if they are crushed for
yeah,
the whole revolution. Yeah,
and I've been struggling to find, if you'll allow me to make like a connection to the real world.
yeah.
Um, as I've been watching people and their perspective on the Israel-Gaza war, and a lot of people, even Jews that I know, are disturbed by the civilian casualty death toll.
Mhm.
And it feels inappropriate to say, well, you're just being squeamish, right? That seems insensitive and not the right words. And I've been struggling to figure out how to articulate it. And I'm getting some clues from this because it's not that we should dismiss it or say, it's for some greater good. It's how do we make this the last war? And I find in Luthen there's a little bit of maybe the correct mentality, right? It's Andor's attached to these personal connections he's made that are hard to dissociate from. And dissociating doesn't mean that you don't feel or that you are dismissing the human toll, but it means, I think, that you have to see the broader context that if we don't solve this once and for all, it's going to continue and be much worse. And the example I hold in my mind is I always remind myself, don't we want Japan post World War II? Isn't that such a wonderful story to tell? And if you hold, and I think what Lunk is saying, Luthen has this context in mind where he's, to your point, also Luke studied history. And I think he knows what the sunrise he wants to see. And he's holding that as his vision, and anything is endurable within that. There is only one outcome, which is the empire has to fall.
Mhm.
And if you hold that as your center, that is the only way for lasting prosperity and peace, then you can bear anything. Not because you're heartless and indifferent to the suffering, but because the suffering has to be put in the context of the greater whole. So I'm still trying to work this out. I don't know if this is tracking really well, but it's I've been trying to navigate it because I've been hearing just one last point on this is I've been really disgusted by this guy, Dave Smith, the comedian, and what he's been saying on the war. And he always brings it back to this human element of real Gazans dying, right? He'll tell really graphic stories of people in buildings as they're being blown up and the implications of that. And he presents it as if you disagree with that, you're a heartless monster. And I'm reminded by a line by Francisco in Atlas Shrugged, when after his money speech, the lady says, it's heartless what you're saying, it's inhuman. And he says, Madame, when people are dying in the street and you cry out, but I didn't know, you will not be forgiven. And what I love about that is you see the ruthless feeling that he actually has, right? Like he's not indifferent to the suffering. He sees in his speech and in the moment, yeah, it's nice in our comfortable penthouse, like hotel
You're
room.
talking about Luthen here?
No, I'm talking about sorry,
Oh,
Francisco.
okay.
When you're looking at Francisco in that moment, he's saying, yeah, it's nice for you to say that I'm heartless when you're comfortable in this party. But when the ideas you're purporting lead to their natural conclusion of people suffering in the street and you cry out, I didn't know, I'm I'm not going to forgive you when I told you so. right, is kind of what he's saying. And I wonder if Luthen's in that perspective too, and if that's the proper
So
way to
that's a
deal.
good question. Is Luthen Francisco there? And I think the thing I would ask is, what does Luthen care most about? And how are we seeing this character? And how are we seeing this character, especially in relation to Cassian? And we'll wrap up in about 5 minutes here. And so we've been talking a little bit about maybe an underlying theme, and I'll share a little bit of, I think, for me, what this arc, this 3 episode arc, episodes 4 through 6, have been doing. It's interesting. In season 1, episodes 4 through 6 expanded the conflict, and the result of the Aldani raid was to make it global. But here, this tranche of episodes 4 through 6 is uh, is narrowing the conflict to a more personal level, and has made it, for me, for the first time, really, Cassian versus Luthen. Now, it's been Cassian versus Luthen to some extent. Luthen wants to recruit Cassian, and Cassian is reluctant, but Cassian has to go off on his journey of self-discovery. But here, for the first time, we're seeing two different approaches to a revolt. And it's captured in that conversation, Joseph, that you had brought up, where you mentioned that line that Luthen brings up, how we are not who we once were. Cassian is saying, we're not droids. And Luthen's retort is, we're not who we once were. And Cassian is saying, we're not droids, because he's got two priorities above the revolution. Priority number one, it's Bix. Bix over the revolt. No. You think I'm coming out here because to maybe to dismiss Bix? No, 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 no. If you want my blood, you better make this right, he says. So Bix is most important to me. And the second thing is, no, I don't want to go. I don't want this Gorman thing to work. I don't want to participate in that, because that is sacrificing a lot of Gormans. They are not ready. They are not soldiers. Killing a soldier is fine. They are not soldiers. And I don't want to participate in that. And in both, Luthen is pushing it. Luthen goes to visit Bix on his own to see if he can recruit Bix, and also to test her out to see if she's going to tell Cassian that Luthen came by, because he wants to be able to give missions to both, to have them be both independent operatives, agents. But he sees that she told him, and that their bond is still very solid and maybe interfering with their dedication to the cause. And he sends Vel and Cinta to Gorman in spite of Cassian's objections. He is pushing. We are in a revolution. We need to make things happen. He's pushing both on the personal and on the social level. On the personal level, Luthen is somebody who we already know has given up on love, kinship, kindness. He's made his soul a sunless place. And he's expecting others to do that. And I think we're seeing it start to tear at him. Bix calls him out on it. He says, "You're not as strong as I think you are, I think." And we're seeing him also devolve a little bit. I'm wondering if the direction that Luthen is going in is not, he may be right that this is what's the way to conduct the revolt for victory, but I think we're seeing him also start to devolve because he's losing his humanity. On the other hand, Cassian is keeping his humanity, his love, his compassion for others. And that is what leads him to the three conversations they have with each other are clashes between these two views. And he wins the clash at the very end, that last scene where Cassian and Bix have the mission together to kill Gortz. That was a mission that was set up by Luthen from the information that he got from Lonnie about Gortz setting up a new office. So when Cassian says, "It's on you to make this right, I will give you my blood, but you make this right with Bix," Luthen is given in because he needs Cassian, And at this moment, he's got to satisfy Cassian. But that conflict is still there. Cassian has not changed. Cassian is still the person who, and it's really fun to look back at the whole of the story with the new knowledge. It became really clear here. Cassian wants to deeply protect the people that he cares about. The very first scene of Andor is him trying to find his sister. And then he constantly comes back to Ferrex in order to get his mother. He's so protective of her. And Bix has this line, I'm not your sister, I'm not your mother. And Bix is actually more of a warrior dedicated to the cause than he is, even though she has the trauma. And maybe even Luthen once sees that Bix is actually more dedicated to the cause and wants to preserve both of them. So he's going to give in to Cassian here. So the personal versus the cause. The cherished values of that you have versus what you're willing to dedicate your life to. Now, Luthen reminds Cassian about the final lines from season 1, where Cassian comes in and says, "Kill me or take me in." And Cassian says, "Yes, I said that, but I joined for something." Talking to a friend, she put it for me perfectly that encapsulated Cassian's character. He is willing to sacrifice himself, but he is not willing to sacrifice those he loves. And Joseph, this brings back what you were anticipating from the first 3 episodes, that Cassian has attachments. And in these 3 episodes, I think we saw how deep they are, how passionate they are, how human he is compared to Luthen. So
What
Lanka or
makes you
Joseph,
think that
yeah, go ahead.
Luthen is there is the scene where he's getting overwhelmed by all the information, all the threads they have, but I don't see him questioning the fundamental choice he's made.
No, he's not questioning the fundamental choice. He's not questioning that. But it's eating him up inside. Just
What
as
makes you think that?
2 things. One, being overwhelmed, and Clea having to come to him and say, okay, focus here. We've got a mission. You're overboard. He says, I'm drowning. You're going overboard. Stop. And also in that brief interchange that he has with Bix, where Luthen points out, oh, you've been having a tough time here. And he says something about, but it's for the cause, and whatever everything is for the cause, and we're, and all that. And Bix first says, you're stronger than I am. And then Luthen recalls a little bit, it comes at you when you're kind of in this dead end place, in this safe house, and in the night. And then Bix says, maybe you're not as strong as I thought.
Hmm.
And I think that speech that we saw, the great speech by Luthen, where he takes the declaration of what he sacrificed, and he says, I have sacrificed everything. I don't think that's without consequences for him personally. So I'm starting to think that we're seeing a dichotomy between winning versus your personal values. And whether that's true or not, that's a different question. Whether that's in the show, I think that's what I'm starting to see in the show. And it's being captured by Cassian versus Luthen. I am very excited, Lanka, to bring back Mon Mothma, to see Mon Mothma and Cassian speak with each other. Because Mon Mothma is very much on the side of, we need personal attachments. Even in this episode, when Mon Mothma says, I'm worried about my cousin, and Luthen says, do you have something urgent you need to tell her? And she says, yes, that I care about her. So maybe we're also getting this conflict between, the Mon Mothma Cassian axis versus the Luthen axis. And maybe now Vel is in that place too, because she has no more attachments. And maybe Bix is also there because she is definitely all about the war. And that's why she got upset at Cassian, not for killing this guy, but killing him for her. You're warping things, she says. Okay, we've been going at it for a while, so I want to wrap it up here. And I love it, Joseph, that I've given you some things to think about in Lanka. I hope I've given some things to think about. Um, I want to get some final thoughts from each of you, but I also want to encourage anybody who's listening to reach out. If you have other historical examples, or if you are in a place, in a country, somewhere in the world where, like Lanka, you feel like you're living a bit in Andor, we'd love to hear from you. So, Joseph, may I have a couple final thoughts from you, and then I'll go to Lanka, and then we'll wrap it up.
Yeah, I'm excited to see how this plays out because I actually don't know where I stand on that issue of who's right, Luthen or Andor. Um, One just thought that occurred to me is Andor is treating the Gormans with kid gloves in a way. He's not taking into account what they're willing to endure and
Mm-hmm.
tolerate. And it's a little presumptuous to say, well,
That's true.
just because you don't think it's going to work out for them doesn't mean this is not worth
Mm-hmm.
for them worth fighting for.
Yeah.
Um, so I'm interested. Yeah, Tony Gilroy is giving us a lot to think about, and I have a feeling there will be a lot more um, essentialized situations he's going to put these characters in that will help us navigate some very real world situations we have to deal with. So I'm grateful and excited for that.
All right. Thanks, Joseph. Lanka, final words from you.
Yes, I will follow your idea, Joseph, and say that Gilroy's really makes us to think a lot. And I'm also waiting very interesting development, more and more development of each character.
Okay. So, Joseph, I think you'll join me in thanking Lanka tremendously for sharing her personal connections to Andor, for sharing a little bit of what's going on in her country, Tbilisi, specifically the capital of Georgia. So, Lanka, thank you very much. And I wish you and your friends and your country all the best.
Thank you.
Well, thank you for your wishes. This is what we really need right now. And thank you for inviting and giving me this really great opportunity to listen to you and to be the part of your podcast. It was really, really great pleasure for me. Thank you. Thank you. And Joseph, thank you for your ideas and your points of view. It was very interesting for me also.
And thank you to everybody listening. Please feel free to share your thoughts or your questions and or your theories. And we'll be back next week for episodes 7, 8, and 9, chapter 3 of Andor season 2. Goodbye, everyone.
Thank you.